I would like to preface this video by stating that I am not an Odinist. I am an eclectic Germanic and Hellenic pagan. I am also not here to judge people. You can believe or support whatever you want, so long as it does not negatively impact me. I prefer individuals over the collective. If you are a decent Odinist, then I do not have a problem with you. I am making this video because I think Odinism is on the rise. I also live in Arizona. Odinism has deep roots in Arizona, and Odinists are all over this state. It is important to know what may or may not be happening in the future. I am keeping this presentation as family-friendly as humanly possible, so I do not get hit by the censors. However, I will drop some Wikipedia articles in the description box below so you can read them if you want. I wanted to use more photos in this presentation, but I wasn't sure if I could or not. I apologize for the lack of pictures, but I do not want this video to be copyrighted. This presentation is the political history of Odinism and why it matters in 2026. Odinism as a movement likely originated during the European revolutions of 1848. It could have started earlier than this, but there is no guarantee that it did. The origin of the early Odinist movement is still unclear. However, the early Odinists were nationalist. They were also inspired by the works of Jacob Grimm and his brother. It is important to note that the early Odinist movement and faith were not controversial. I just wanted to touch upon the early history of Odinism in this video so I could point out the fact that Odinism is not an old movement or faith. It is relatively new. I have coined the term New Odinism to represent modern Odinism. In my view, New Odinism started in 1969. Odinists were doing things prior to 1969, but Elsie Christensen is the core of New Odinism. She is the one that made it stick. Odinism is seen as a far-right movement, but this is not the case. The American left has been funding Odinists for a very long time. If you want somebody to blame for the rise of New Odinism, then American leftists are the ones to blame for it. Christianity is also responsible for the rise of New Odinism, but I will talk about this later. Elsie Christensen was a Danish woman born on September 12, 1913. Elsie would become a follower of the Austrian painter. She would eventually leave Denmark for Canada and make her way down to the US. She was not a good person in my view. Elsie would create the Odinist Fellowship in 1969 and the Odinist shortly after. The Ossetry Folk Assembly, or the AFA, would end up becoming a branch of the Odinist Fellowship. However, the Odinist Fellowship was not limited to the US. The Odinist Fellowship was also in the UK. What makes Elsie Christensen interesting is that she decided to gain followers by recruiting people through the prison system. Christianity preys on the most vulnerable people in the prison system, so she decided to do the same thing. It worked for her because there is still a large Odinist population in the US prison system today. This is because it unites people in the prison system. Although it is important to note that not all Odinists are criminals and not all Odinists share the same beliefs. This is why I care about individuals over the collective. There are some good Christians, Muslims, and Odinists out there. I am not going to forsake the whole over some bad apples. If I did this, then I would have to isolate myself from society, because bad apples can be found everywhere. Elsie Christensen was heavily influenced by two people. The first person is Alexander Rudd Mills, and the second is Francis Parker Yockey. I will briefly cover these two men, but I will leave their Wikipedia articles in the description box. Both are not YouTube friendly. Alexander Rudd Mills was born on July 15, 1885. He was born in Hell, otherwise known as Australia. He traveled around the globe trying to figure out his own personal politics. He decided that he hated communism after visiting the Soviet Union and thought the Austrian painter was a good guy. He ended up embracing the Austrian painter and becoming one of his followers. Alexander would create the first Anglican Church of Odin in Australia. There's a lot to say about this guy, but none of it is YouTube friendly. He was an awful person. There is very little that I can say about Francis Parker Yockey in this video, because he is not YouTube friendly in the slightest. But what I can say is that he is the personification of evil, and he was able to successfully elude the FBI for a decade, while spreading propaganda in the US and overseas. He traveled everywhere and worked with some of the worst people on the planet. This guy is a personification of evil, and few people seem to know about him. Christianity has been the main religion in the Western world for the past 1,000 years. Christianity is a globalist religion that preys on the most vulnerable of people in society. Due to Christianity being a globalist religion, there is nothing special about it, because it must appeal to everybody. You do not get a warm, fuzzy feeling for being a Christian. Historically speaking, Christians have gone after other Christians. In other words, Christianity is not a unifying force in most cases. There are exceptions to this rule, like the Crusades. The Crusades unified Christians, but modern Christianity does not unite. It divides. It is this division that has created an opening for other faiths to flourish in the modern world. Odinism has preyed on the most vulnerable people within the prison system, and this makes it like Christianity. However, Odinism is a uniting force within the prison system. More importantly, it is a lifeline for people. It has allowed people to band together and stay alive in a harsh environment. This is why it has so much staying power. Odinism is a popular religion in 2026, and I think this movement will see rapid growth in the future. This is due to Odinists doing things. Odinists have recently started to take over the British National Party in the UK, and they are trying to rebrand themselves in the process. I do think they will be successful at some point because the political alternatives in the UK are weak. The way mainstream political parties in the UK act might force people to vote for the BNP. Odinists have been fighting on the front lines in Ukraine since the beginning of the war. There are likely millions of Odinists across the Western world and Russia right now. The Odinists in 2026 are largely nationalist and have no problem fighting against anything that becomes problematic to their homeland. While the Western world is largely controlled by Christians, and the Christians are letting the Western world decay. Christianity has made it possible for the Odinist movement to thrive and pick up steam. The Odinists on the front lines in Ukraine are going to gain a lot of power after the war ends. The question becomes, will the modern Odinist movement remain nationalist, or will it embrace its globalist, problematic past? Only time will tell. Odinism is a wild card in American and European politics. Not all Odinists have done bad things, but most of them have. Most of them would be willing to do bad things again if their family was in danger, if their country was under attack. I have my own issues with the Odinist movement, but we could end up seeing a future where it is the Odinists that liberate Europe, because the Christians are not doing anything. This is the ironic reality of the times that we live in. It is a strange time to be alive. Thanks for listening. Have a fantastic day or night.